Hello, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. We're happy to have you with us. One of the things I'm looking forward to in today's show, in-depth discussion with Jeff Sentell, our final talk with him before National Signing Day next week and the official conclusion of the 2023 recruiting cycle. What does that mean for Duce Robinson? What does that mean for even Walker Lyons? A couple of big-time tight end prospects that are still out there. What does that mean for Georgia putting a nice punctuation mark on what has already been in the league class? And there's also some pretty big-time rumblings out there for the 2024 class as well. So we'll do a lot of that with Jeff Sentell. And off the top of the show today, Georgia's already getting a lot of hype for next year from ESPN, but I'm going to tell you to be very careful with that. Be very careful with it. I'll give you a specific reason why. We'll do that here coming up. And I guess I have to point out that I feel like that something that a lot of Georgia fans have liked over the course of the last 24 hours may not be real. I'd hate to be that way, but I think it's probably true. So we'll spend a second on that. But I will give you something in place of that is real. So we'll try to do that and see where it all lands us here today. And generally speaking, try to have a good time on a Friday. Oh, yeah, by the way, one more thing, too. I got a family thing today, so I got to pop out of here. So for those of you who watch us live, you like our R.S. Andrews cool down to close the show, we got to be super quick with that today, and I mean like lightning fast. So apologies in advance for the lack of comments at the end today, but we'll try to make it up for you next week. So with all that said, let's get ready to rock and roll here on a Friday. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I'm in a position that I don't really want to be in. On a Friday, we typically like to create good vibes to go into the weekend, whether Georgia's actually going to play on the weekend or not. Just something kind of nice about a weekend, a little time off from work for many of you. And so we like to be in a good mood on a Friday we possibly can. And I don't like to ever really be what I would think of as kind of a wet blanket, someone who's kind of, creating negativity where it doesn't need to be, especially on a Friday. That just sort of seems like the wrong thing to do. But as I look at my, prepared show sheet for today, this was not planned. It was not even necessarily anticipated, but it has worked out this way. I guess I'm a little bit of a wet blanket on today's show. Coming up in a few minutes, there's a thing that Georgia fans have kind of taken some comfort in over the course of the last 24 hours. And I guess I've got to step up here and say I don't believe this is real, so I have to be a wet blanket as it relates to that. I don't necessarily relish that, but I think it's going to happen. And off the top of the program here, I am also going to be a little bit of a wet blanket saying that some nice things that ESPN is saying about Georgia should matter too much to UGA fans. And so I guess I've got to work hard in the midst of this conversation, try to find a way to put a positive spin on this, because who wants to be such a sourpuss going into a Friday? So I've got to be careful with all of that a little bit. But let me kind of explain it this way, and we'll just sort of see where it takes us. I like it when ESPN kind of gets all their writers together. They do kind of like a round table type conversation. It's almost like a text thread, what it almost ends up kind of functioning like, and it's an early preview for the 2023 season. Around here, we believe it's never too soon to start talking about whatever the next college football season is, and so here in January, why not spend a little time talking about what might happen next year? And there's this collection of ESPN writers, and one of the questions they were kind of kicking around is, well, who is the best player in the country for next year? And you're probably not surprised to see some Georgia players kind of factor pretty prominently in all of that. Good bit of hype coming the way here. First for Brock Bowers, Adam Rittenberg, who's a writer for ESPN, makes it very clear in the midst of all of this that he believes that Brock Bowers is the best player in the country. And who are we to dispute all of that? Let me read what Rittenberg says here. He says he won't be the number one overall pick in the 2024 draft, but think about what Bowers already has accomplished in his career. He's almost impossible to stop on a consistent basis, despite being the most consistent receiving option for the Bulldogs. Bowers strikes me as a player who should already be in the NFL, but has to stick around the college level for another season. He's going to be working with a new quarterback this fall, but I expect another huge season for the Mackey Award winner. Once again, that's Adam Rittenberg from ESPN, touting Brock Bowers as college football's best player. Now, I have to say, I believe this to be true for quite some time, that Bowers, I think, is just as good and just as valuable as anybody. And if I had the chance to trade him for anybody in college football, be it Caleb Williams or one of the other quarterbacks in this past season or any certainly pass catcher out there, I wouldn't swap Bowers for anybody. I think Bowers is that good. And, I have to admit that, along the way this season, I guess I probably at times would sort of get a little frustrated that Georgia was content to kind of keep him in kind of an ensemble role, in kind of a complementary role to the other guys in this offense, and didn't really fully showcase what Bowers was. And I have to admit that I sort of thought that was a mistake. Well, ultimately, Georgia went 15-0. They scored 1,000,000 points along the way. They finally did unleash him in the national championship game because at that point in time, there's no point saving anything. That's just the last game, and Bowers had darn near 200 yards receiving. So pretty clearly, Georgia had an understanding of what Bowers was, and when they really got to the moment at the end of the season that mattered, they unleashed him, and he had a great game. And I think pretty clearly Bowers has had a chance to demonstrate just how good he is. But at a place like Georgia, they're not going to let anybody kind of stand out from the pack from anybody else. That Georgia tries to spread the football around, tries to get everybody involved. And who's to say that's not working when you are the back-to-back national champions and when you've obviously had the offensive success you've had? So I think that Rittenberg's probably right. Bowers is that good, and yet I think in 2023 we're likely to see Bowers still somewhat in a similar role that he kind of was this year, where it's like you may see him explode a game or two, and they may get somebody else involved in the next game. And then if they ever get into a situation they really need somebody to step up, well, Bowers will probably be the guy they call on to do that. But if Georgia's coasting through much of the year the way they did this past year, then you may not ever, quite see Brock Bowers really featured and showcased in this offense the way that maybe other offenses showcase their best player. But that doesn't seem to slow Georgia down from being as good as can possibly be. But that's actually not my reason for bringing all this up. My reason for bringing all this up kind of also coincides with, while Adam Rittenberg, the writer, is saying, I believe that Brock Bowers is the best player in the country, you've got a different ESPN writer in this sort of roundtable discussion saying, actually, I think a different Georgia player is the best player in the entire country. Bill Conley made the case for Duce Johnson, the linebacker here. So once again, let me kind of show you this. An ESPN writer saying some very strong things, some very complimentary words about a Georgia player. Conley writing of Duce Johnson that he's strong against both the run and the pass, and with more pass rushing opportunities, he could become one of the nation's sack leaders. On a per-rush basis this past year, he says he was brilliant. Once again, that's Bill Conley from ESPN. Okay, so here's the thing, that if you really look at this ESPN kind of roundtable of all these writers looking ahead to next season, you've got the possibility that Georgia has the best offensive player in the country in Brock Bowers, according to what Adam Rittenberg says, the best defensive player in the country in Duce Johnson, according to what Bill Conley says. Now, at face value, of course, that's good news because, as we've said before, in order to be a great team, you've got to have a collection of great players, top-end performers playing at the highest level, moving on to the first round of the NFL draft, getting those All-American nods or first-team All-SEC type stuff. That's what the collection of national champions always has, is that group of elite players who will propel the team to that kind of success. And as we've said already, I believe we said this week, that Georgia's kind of set up pretty well in 2023 for once again that to be true. But the level of praise that ESPN gives Georgia here, I think it's the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to be a little bit careful with, a little bit cautious about. And I'm not talking about rat poison. I'm not. Anytime you hear like these kinds of good things said about your team, there's a tendency to sort of veer this in the direction of what Nick Saban once kind of brought up about rat poison and, the idea this could breed complacency on this team or something like that. And that's not what I'm talking about here. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm going to tell you, though, is, and this is where I kind of like become a little bit of a wet blanket, don't mean to be, and hopefully I don't stay this way very long. But my point here is that with ESPN saying, Georgia's going to be the preseason number one, they got the best offensive player in the country in Brock Bowers, the best defensive player in the country in Duce Johnson. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like what we would have heard about Alabama last year, who was also the preseason number one and also on paper was thought to have the best offensive player in the country in quarterback Bryce Young and the best defensive player in the country in edge rusher Will Anderson? That doesn't all of this sound very, very similar? And what we saw with Alabama a year ago is it's just really difficult to predict how a season is going to play out. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. College football is easy to project, but difficult to predict. We can look on paper and see who should be number one to begin a season, but to actually have it play out that way sometimes turns out to be a little bit more difficult to predict than it seems like it's possibly supposed to be. And as Georgia gets ready in 2023 to, as we say around here, go for 3 in 23, the fact that they have won the last 2 national championships, I don't know that it makes the upcoming Georgia season any less difficult to predict than it otherwise would be. That just sort of stands to reason for me that somehow, some way, something's going to occur, some sort of issues are going to be there to deal with, that it's just not quite likely that Georgia coasts to this national championship with a player like JDJ on defense and a player like Brock Bowers on offense as a preseason number 1. The idea that Georgia just sort of coasts through the season wire to wire, I'm led to assume that it won't be any easier for Georgia as a preseason number 1 this year than it is for most preseason number 1s in most year, including Alabama here this past season. And if you don't believe me on this, let's listen to Kirby Smart. Now, Smart was speaking to ESPN back in early January about how challenging it is to win back-to-back titles. So we're going to take what Smart said about trying to win 2 in a row and now amplify that a little bit more about the idea of trying to win 3 in a row. And Smart would tell you that, hey, obviously you wouldn't even be in a position to do this if you weren't already a very good team, but lots of very good teams who've been in this position have kind of just sort of fallen by the wayside and somehow, some way have found it, difficult to do, a mission that was difficult to finish. So Smart's own words from January, I think, set the stage for an even greater challenge for this upcoming season. Once again, here is Kirby Smart on that topic.
I know how hard it is to do because there's a lot of times we didn't do it, if you know what I'm saying. We did it once, but while we were there, we won 4, and we're only able to repeat once. It's really hard to do because human nature is to relax, and when people pat you on the back, human nature is to say, I'm good, I've done a good job, and we won it last year, let's take a year off. I also had the great fortune of having a really good team last year, and our staff and our organization did such a good job with that team, but we lost all of them. So it was like starting over. So the motivation job was probably not as hard as most repeats are.
So I think that's really interesting from Smart there, and obviously the thing he's speaking about at the beginning of that clip is his time in Alabama, where they obviously won a lot of national championships and had, as he said, lots of opportunity to repeat, but only actually succeeded in doing that just the one time in 2011 and 2012. Now Georgia's done this here in 2021 and 2022, but the task of coming back and winning that third, I don't think gets any easier because you've won the last 2. As Smart said, hey, maybe it's even more difficult because there's just that natural tendency to want to relax at some point in time. I honestly don't know what the future holds for Georgia. I don't know what the next year will be like, the next 15 games that Georgia has a chance to play there in 2023. But I do believe this. For as possible as I think a third straight national championship is, I think it's going to be really, really hard. And on paper, I can't necessarily explain why it's going to be really hard, but I'm led to conclude that it probably will be. And some of the people who are already kind of flippantly, yeah, Georgia's going to win the national championship, I've already called it, I've already predicted it. I just think that that's, even if it turns out to be true, and obviously I think there's a very good chance it will turn out to be true. Even if it turns out to be true, I think to be so flippant and just already declaring that, I think is a misunderstanding of what actually awaits Georgia or any team that might find itself in this spot when you look ahead to the upcoming season. College football oftentimes just proves, very, very difficult to predict. And, by the way, if Georgia actually does end up winning it, if Georgia actually does bring home a third straight national championship, spending this time at the beginning of the year with a full appreciation for just how difficult that task is and how challenging that journey will be, I think it'll actually make the moment at the end of all of this all the more enjoyable when you appreciate just how much Georgia has been able to accomplish. That no matter how big of a favorite Georgia's going to be in all its regular season games, and no matter how many consecutive games Georgia would have won by the time it gets to next year's college football playoff and whatever else stands their way then, it is still not easy to do this 3 years in a row. But here's what we know. Georgia's going to give it its best shot. And one way or another, even if I would tell you to ignore the ESPN hype, the truth is it really is good to have a player of Brock Bowers' caliber on offense. And it really is good to have a player of Jamon Dumas' Johnson's caliber on defense. And while they may be the best, there are frankly a lot of Georgia players on both sides of the ball who come pretty close to being just as good as those guys are there as well. So there is a reason that Georgia's in the position that it is, preseason number 1, with a chance to win 3 straight national championships, because it does have an awful lot of talent. And maybe Georgia can kind of find that secret magical recipe that give it a chance to do something that no team's done and really in all of modern college football history. The idea of 3 straight national championships, it is a very, very big topic, but it's a conversation around these dogs that we're going to be having all year long. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we are happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app, 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, of course, on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast, wherever you find them, Apple, Spotify, all the various podcast platforms there too. We're just happy to have you with us as a part of our program today. Big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible there as well. You know, we're getting really close to Valentine's Day. You know, we're kind of post-college football season, at least anyway. We kind of roll through the final NFL games, conference championship weekend this weekend, obviously Super Bowl coming up after that. Then you're getting ready for Valentine's Day on the other side of all of that. And, of course, Kroger's got savings to swoon over here during this Valentine's time of year. Baking supplies, treats, candies, Valentine's Day cards. You know, Valentine's is still kind of a big deal for my kids. It's one of those things where, like, they are very well aware of all the holidays that exist where they get gifts for. And, obviously, Valentine's on their list. So it's not just, like, trust me when I tell you, like my wife and I, we don't really share much of anything with Valentine's for each other at this stage of our life, but we do lots for our kids, I guess, because that's what they sort of expect. So whatever Valentine's means for you, your sweetheart or your kids or whatever else, you can get all big-time savings on that with your local Kroger. Kroger.com/Valentines for more on that. Kroger.com/Valentines for more on that. Or as they said when I was younger, they used to say Valentine's. Y'all ever say that? Valentine's? Let's make sure we know it's actually Valentine's. Valentine's. That's how it's spelled. But nonetheless, Kroger.com/Valentines for more on that. We're going to get Jeff Sentell. Pretty wide-ranging conversation with Jeff here coming up on a lot of fronts. Obviously getting ready for the conclusion of the 2023 recruiting cycle next week, so we're excited about that. Georgia's got a couple of big names still in mind there, and there's already some pretty interesting rumblings here on the class of 2024 as well, including a big decision looming on National Signing Day for 2024 prospects. So we're going to cover all that with Jeff here coming up in a moment. Before that, though, let's go around the DawgHouse here, presented today by our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And once again, I kind of find myself in the role of wet blanket here for a moment, because there's this thing that Georgia fans have been sharing, and I've seen the graphic kind of like constructed a couple of different ways here. So I honestly don't know what the origin story on this is, but man, there is an epidemic right now of fake quotes out there where there was one with like Joe Burrow this week. There's just a lot of thing where you take some words that kind of fit into whatever the hot topic conversation on the internet is, you paste those words next to the so-and-so's face. It's a nice-looking graphic, and that thing just goes viral. I don't really know. I mean, it's like the old line from the Batman movie about some people just sort of want to watch the world burn. I really don't know what the benefit is of kind of passing around sort of the fake quote stuff. But it seems like there's way more of this than there used to be, and I have to confess, I believe that one of the things that Georgia fans have been passing around here a little bit as of late, I believe is a fake quote. It may have been real at one point in time, but it's been kind of passed around as sort of new information as a response to some of the Todd Monken to the NFL rumors and reports have been out there. And so I have to confess, I think this is not real. Let me show it to you anyway. And I'm going to probably confuse people more by even showing this, but I don't believe this is real. So the way it always works is like, you see the quote kind of framed the same way almost every time. Early Thursday morning, Monken was asked about his future at Georgia. Look, man, I love to win, and we're winning right now. As long as we keep doing that, I love it here in Athens and plan to retire here. I don't believe that's a real quote. I don't think Monken ever said that, and I don't think he said that this week. And I just have to admit, I don't believe that's real. And so, like, when you see these things pop up, if you just want to search the quote, because if Monken gave a quote that's that clear and that direct, then it would be literally reported everywhere. Our site would be writing about it. The other sites would be writing about it. That's the kind of thing that everybody would be writing about. So if you search a quote like that and you don't see the quote pop up in the search, then that's all you kind of really need to know. That's a volatile enough quote that if that was real, I mean, trust me, we brought 5 stories about it. And so when you search something like that, you just don't see it pop up. That's what it kind of lets you know. However, so since that's not real, and I don't want to kind of fully be a wet blanket here about stuff like this, let me give you something that is real, because if you want to go back to Los Angeles, we were there for the national championship, had a chance to sort of briefly talk with Todd Monken. A lot of folks did. Had a chance to briefly talk with Monken. And one of the things that came up at the time is his coaching, past and what he has been interested in. And the decision to kind of go Southern Miss head coach, and then you're back in the NFL. You're calling plays in Tampa. You end up in Cleveland. For the most part, seems like he was pretty unhappy there. You land at Georgia, and obviously I would say he's had the greatest professional success of his career right here at UGA. The decision to kind of move through all of that, I had a chance to be a part of that conversation with him. This is one of those things where, like, it's a big room, there's a lot going on, so it's probably not, like, pristine audio quality, but you can hear what he's saying. So this is, I guess, some of the most recent stuff that Monken has said about his coaching life and the various decisions he's made to take the jobs that he's taken. This was from back in L.A., kind of a little bit of a window into his thought process about all of that. And it's the kind of thing where, Monken's pretty matter-of-fact about a lot of this. But here is Todd Monken talking about some of his, travels as a coach. Maybe this more relevant now that there's been some rumblings out there of, maybe he might be a candidate in the NFL. Take a listen to this.
Embrace where you're at. Take on the challenge where you're at, because you don't know what's next. At the moment, you do what you think is best for your career. At that moment, I thought go be the head coach at Southern Miss. And when we weren't very good, I thought that was stupid as hell. That was a dumb decision. But the challenge was there, and I knew it was a great place. I needed to do it better, and we did. And then when the Tampa Bay job came open, I thought that was the best thing for me at that time, to go take on that challenge. And it was. And when things didn't work out in Cleveland, or when I went to Cleveland, I thought it was then. Right or wrong, I did. And when I came here, I thought it was. And so you just kind of take the information that you have and continue to strive to get better in all areas, schematically, dealing with players. So that's all you do, because I don't really know tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think that is the real feeling of Todd Monken we said this last week, is that you sort of see the NFL stuff pop up, whether it be Jeremy Fowler from ESPN or Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network. Hey, maybe Todd Monken could be a candidate there. But as we told you last week, the local folks in Tampa Bay, the local media that's a little, I would say, closer to the situation, the one thing they were open with their reporting about this time a week ago was, I really have no idea if Todd Monken's interested in this job or not. It just sort of seems like it might make sense as a fit, or maybe someone, close to Monken likes the idea of his name being out there. But there was no certainty that Monken was interested in this job the way there would have been about Bill O'Brien, who pretty obviously was interested in the NFL, now has been hired by the New England Patriots. There was just not that level of certainty when it comes to Todd Monken. And I think when you hear Monken just from, just a few days ago, sort of speaking about, kind of how he's viewed some of the coaching decisions that he's made, I think you're kind of left to know that this is not a guy that just sort of walks around talking that way necessarily. But when you listen to him talk about the various places that he's been, it's pretty obvious that he has found a level of success here at Georgia, and he has seemed to be a fit here at Georgia in a way that maybe he has not always been in all of his previous stops. And so maybe that's the kind of thing that makes Todd Monken want to stick around. I certainly have no reason to believe that he is leaving, or even really a reason to believe that he wants to leave. But at the same time, I think that Todd Monken's actual feelings on some of this kind of stuff can be a little mysterious, just because of the fact that he's not exactly, one of those guys that just sort of walks around, I guess, being super open about things like that. I mean, look, he's very well paid here. He's having great success here, and Georgia seems set up for a very high level of success here in the future. That might be enough to keep him here, and all likelihood, I guess it probably will be. But this is one of those things that Georgia fans certainly took some comfort this week, and maybe thinking that that Monken had shut all this down. But I don't quite believe that quote was quite maybe what some Georgia fans hoped that it would be. But that doesn't mean that Monken has plans on leaving. If anything, he's got plenty of reasons why certainly Georgia would be a very good home for him for the very near future. And obviously UGA fans hope that is true. And we'll continue to follow this story if something else real does come out on all of this. And for now, we'll make that Around the DawgHouse, presented by Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And obviously here in this new year, so many of you have big plans when it comes to real estate. You want to get close to a new job, or you want to get closer to family again, or maybe you've lived away and looking to get back here in Georgia and get close to these dogs again there as well. Whatever your plan is for the new year that involves selling a house, buying a home, our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services can be a great resource for you to help guide you in those real estate decisions. They got 29 offices across our area, more than 1,500 associates working with people just like you each and every day on, as I said, you got to, buy a home, sell a house. You want to get involved in commercial real estate, or, you've maybe taken that step, taken on a rental property. And let's face it, when it comes to managing your own rental property, that is that's a big thing. It's a big time consuming thing. It's not for everybody. So maybe property management's one of those things that you want to think about Berkshire Hathaway Home Services for. Let them help you manage the income producing rental property that you have. Whatever your thing is, our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services believe the best time for new beginnings is right now. So you can check them out online, bhhsgeorgia.com. That's bhhsgeorgia.com, and find out about all the ways in which Berkshire Hathaway Home Services are kind of walking people through their real estate decisions, getting you from the contract to the closing table, and getting a satisfactory outcome for you so that you can really fulfill whatever your ambitions are here in this new year. Let a great real estate decision help guide your way and all of that. Our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services want to do that with you and for you. So once again, find them online, bhhsgeorgia.com. That's bhhsgeorgia.com. All right, there is, before we are done, pretty big rumor out there involving a familiar name, maybe landing back at Alabama. So we'll touch on that here for a moment. And we'll have some fun here before we wrap things up. But a lot to get to prior to that on the recruiting trail. National Signing Day coming up next week. Big rumblings with the class of 2024 too. A couple of Georgia signees got some good news this week. Kind of a nice pat on the back for them as they finish up their high school career. So we'll try to cover all of this over the course of the next few minutes as we go on the road with Jeff Sentell and our friends from AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insight.
On the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell. A lot of stuff to try to get to here. And at least off the top, some of this is going to be tight end related as we get ready to bring a conclusion to the class of 2023. Obviously, Jeff, right now, the man of the hour, the name to know is the 5-star tight end, Duce Robinson. Seems like Georgia's in a pretty good position here for Duce, but it's also one of those things that, in the world we live in now, you're always kind of on guard for anything sort of late in the process here. And I guess there's been some chatter as well online about the idea of would Robinson come east and take a visit to Georgia here this weekend. What is the latest on that, and does it matter at all if Robinson comes to Georgia this weekend or not?
Yeah, Brandon, I think that's a really good question, that latter part. First of all, you guys got to understand how busy Duce Robinson is. I think he just got back from Hawaii last weekend. He had a workout with the Dodgers before that. He had his birthday weekend in Hawaii. He had a workout with the Padres yesterday that took up the balance of his afternoon. And I don't know. I just got the feeling from Duce that he didn't really need to see a lot of schools, especially the schools that he'd already seen. Like a revisit, I didn't know if that was something that was really stressing him a lot, or he needed to see a revisit. I think it was probably more of a matter of Oregon that never got a visit, a school like that, him just taking a trip, being able to do that. The main thing we're going to stress in this recruitment, Brandon, is he has said it's not NIL related, even though this is the time of year where, I don't know, I think things stack up. Let me just say that, Brandon,
right.
tongue-in-cheek a little bit. But I think the Dogs, should they win this recruitment for Duce Robinson, I think they've done enough. Remember, Brandon, Georgia offered him as a baseball player before they offered him as a football player. That was great. There's actually a relationship that Kirby Smart was actually coached his father, Dominic Robinson, another two-sport player, a guy that played a little bit in the NFL, a guy that is really a successful baseball trainer in Arizona as well. I think that has a lot to do with it. And you got to remember, Brandon, this guy took an official visit to Georgia for the Kent State game, and things we have not seen on the DawgNation recruiting board in 8-9 years of doing this. We don't usually see Arizona prospects come in for the Kent State game and Georgia's stock surge after a visit. That's usually the throwaway official visit with 1 out of 5, but the Dogs remain big here. The main thing I want to stress with everybody, Duce is going to play baseball. He's going to play baseball whether he's signed and drafted by a Major League Baseball team and do that kind of in the summers, or he's going to play college baseball at, one of his top choices. It still feels like Texas, Southern Cal, and also Georgia there is kind of the really, really front runners there for Duce Robinson. Dylan Raiola, Brandon, is taking a visit to Southern Cal this weekend, the five-star quarterback on every Georgia fan's mind, kind of burned in their brain right now. I kind of wonder, that might be a school that maybe Duce takes a trip to, maybe not, but there is a strong relationship there between Dylan and Duce as well.
So you mentioned the Dominic Robinson thing, Duce's father, and maybe I should have known this. I just didn't. Kirby the other day when he was doing the interview with Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley, just kind of dropped that in there that, I coached his father at Florida State, and I guess I didn't quite realize the family connection for those with the Robinsons had gone back quite so far. How big of a factor is that in this recruitment, the fact that Kirby's known Mr. Robinson for as long as he's known him?
Yeah, first of all, it was very subtle, very smooth. They were asking him just questions about, coaching scope and, his experience. And he said, I've gotten to the point now where we're recruiting players that are the sons of players I coached. Well, Brandon, this was way back at Florida State. And I think the Kirby Smart that was I believe he was a GA at Florida State for that time. I think he was maybe a kinder, gentler soul back at Florida State on the practice field than he is now running the mic at the University of Georgia. I think his coaching prowess has grown by leaps and bounds. But he's very clever. He wasn't talking specifically about Duce. He was kind of dancing around the rule book there. I thought it was funny how Barkley said, Kirby, you don't need another tight end. Come on.
Yeah,
now.
It was funny.
You got enough tight ends there at Georgia. It's always good TV when Barkley and Ernie are involved. But I think it's just here's what I know. I know that the Robinsons are very big on relationships, and that one extends a long time backwards when they knew what Kirby was like as a young coach coming up, and they see where he is now. Obviously, that's got to look very positive to any family, considering what Georgia has stacked up in the Kirby Smart resume right there. I'll say this, Brennan. If we want to, I think our buddy Connor Riley likes to come with some things called quake takes, which are more earth-shattering than hot takes or whatever. Looks to me, from what I saw of Duce, eyeballed him in Orlando for a few practice days. I think the earliest potential contribution he might make anywhere, Texas, Southern Cal, Georgia, would be as a receiver flexed out, more so than a pure tight end.
Speaking of tight ends, there's also Walker Lyons is out there right now. Walker's a guy that you've covered at DawgNation already. We saw the photo this week of Todd Hartley and Kirby Smart and Todd Monken all out there. I have a couple of questions for you on this. I guess let me begin with this. If Lyons were to sign with Georgia, does he count as a 2023 signee? And I guess in a day and age in which there's not a 25-man hard cap anymore, does it even matter what class he's considered to be in? I mean, logistically, there's some interesting stuff related to Lyons because, as he's told you, it'd be a year and a half before he probably got here because of his mission trip that he'd be going to as a part of his church with the LDS there. So, logistically, how would Lyons count if he comes here?
Good question, Brandon. First of all, I need to get your take on that picture. Looked like Kirby was on his tippy toes a little bit. Some very astute readers viewers pointed that out for me.
A little bit.
I'd imagine you'd be the type of coach, Brandon, when you're next to a 6'4", 6'5" tight end. Would you get on those tippy toes a little bit for a picture?
Yeah, listen, I can certainly understand that. And we all have our things about, pictures. Trust me when I tell you there's plenty of pictures that kind of get me in the angle that I don't want to be seen at. So my thing's not height, but I got plenty of other things that I'm probably a little self-conscious about when it comes to photos. So I'm not going to dispute that issue there. And obviously Kirby stands plenty tall, no matter how tall he actually is. But yeah, you couldn't help but notice that a little bit. And you also couldn't help but notice the presence of Todd Monken in that photo, which was a nice thing to see too.
Yeah, if I was Kirby Smart, I'd feel good about recruiting tight ends that I have to get on my tippy toes for.
That's right.
That means he's recruiting those future NFL bodies. He doesn't need to be flat-footed for tight ends.
If it's a tight end that's the same height as Kirby Smart, we got some real problems, right? We got some real problems at that point.
Yeah, those are the tight ends that the Georgia Bulldogs never threw the ball to.
That's right.
Good question, though. I mean, first of all, Brandon, I probably never will cover a recruitment quite like Walker Lyons. It's kind of a delayed entry. To answer your question specifically, doesn't matter what recruiting class you count for. It's when you show up and enroll. That's when you hit the 85. I think the NCAA has loosened a lot of rules lately about how many you can sign because of the transfer portal. because of, guys leaving and coming and needing to have bodies for spring practice after guys hit the portal. Really, Walker's going to show up. I believe he's always told me consistently 12 to 17 months. And really, it's not like they don't have to build a house. They don't have to build a habitat. They don't have to – there's not a set thing where you check a bunch of boxes, you do a lot of good deeds, and then your mission's over. I know that's a very rudimentary and simple way of explaining it. It's basically just time he has to spend in Norway. He actually has some family in Norway. He's going to do a lot of work like park and rec type stuff, teaching football, working with youth, running like coaching clinics and camps and stuff like that. He says he's going to find time every day to work out, though, and catch a ball. For him, very unique, Brandon. I don't know if we've ever seen, at least to my recollection, a Latter-day Saints, member of the Latter-day Saints Church going to go play potentially at a Georgia. You've got a Mormon mission to calculate in here. Brandon, used to be Mormon missions, took about 2 full years, but they're not quite the same as they were back, a generation ago. Lions is just really fascinating, Brandon, because I think the one telltale thing is I think Pierce Sperling moved up to 2, Lawson Lucky moved up to 7, and then Walker Lyons is 5th. So add in Duce, who we just talked about, number 1, number 2, number 5, and number 7 tight ends in the country could potentially all sign with Georgia. And I think there are solid chances of that feat happening. And you got to look at that, Brandon. You and I have been talking about this a long time. It's kind of like the linebacker spot this year in the 2023 class. Should Georgia do this, I'm going to call it the hoarding class because, Brandon, having 3 of the top 5 linebackers in the country and having 4 of the top 7 tight ends in the country, Brandon, the SEC entirety as a conference in its totality, they don't do that most years. And the Dogs have a chance to do that at both positions in 2023. With a lot of these special situations, you got to look at tight end also. Hartley's room has lost Darnell Washington, Brett Seither portal, Rylan Goody portal, and then Eric Gilbert portal as well. So he's got 4 new seats, 4 open chairs in his room, and that's another consequence of how all this could possibly happen in one recruiting class.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, Lawson Lucky, Pierce Sperling, Walker Lyons, Duce Robinson. Jeff, if you told me that a tight end coach signed those tight ends over the course of a career, I mean, if a guy stayed here 5 or 6 years and he signed that over the course of his career, that'd be a pretty good job for a recruiter. For Todd Hartley to do that in 1 year is ludicrous. Like, that's ludicrous to go along with everything else he's already done to sign that many tight ends in one class, if that's indeed the case. Now, I guess, as you said, the Lions thing, sort of ends up being more for the future maybe, but they're all technically classified in the same group, at least right now. Like, I mean, you got to give Todd Hartley another raise because, I mean, he's out there redefining what it means. Not only is he redefining what the tight end position kind of means, but he sort of redefined how one would even recruit the tight end position, given the absolute embarrassment of riches he might bring in here.
Yeah, Brendan, he's a middle Georgia native. I think he went to Jones County High School, and almost to the point where you got to get Ace Hartley on another more important problem like the global warming or the national debt or everybody getting along. I mean, when you look at Hartley, everybody's seen some of the videos where when he has a guy make the league, he requests a jersey and the player signs it and he hangs them all up in the tight end room. We know the phrase, you're going to need a bigger boat from Jaws. Well, they may give him a bigger room too because that's going to stack up. And Brandon, I wrote this. You're exactly right. I wrote this about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I said this could be the greatest tight end recruiting class of the last 5 years when you look at schools and how they've recruited over the last 5 years. And you don't even need to use Darnell Washington or Brock Bowers or Oscar Delp. You can just use this one class as the resume potentially for Todd Hartley, and that would be the best tight end class of the last 5 years, and it could potentially be done in the 2023 cycle.
What do you make of Monken being out there for this? And, we've seen, I guess he was also, I think in Tennessee, I've seen him show up there too. I mean, he's certainly still active out there on the recruiting trail. Should that quiet down some of the Monken of the NFL stuff? The fact that he is still out there traveling across the country, meeting with tight ends who won't be here for a while. If he indeed comes, the fact that Monken is still such an ever-present factor on this recruiting trail, does that change the way in which some of this NFL rumor mill stuff should be covered?
I think so. You see it, Brandon, not only looking at, Lyons is a guy that potentially see the field anywhere in college football until 2024. And there was also a visit earlier this week to go check out Dylan Raiola at Chandler High School in Arizona, the aforementioned number one prospect in the country for 2024. And not only, it's not like just short-term recruiting, and you see him and you see the Georgia helicopter flying everywhere these days. I think it was in Long Island. I think it was in Connecticut very recently. Those social media feeds are coming out right now. They went up to see Ryan Puglisi as well up in Avon Old Farms in Connecticut. Brendan, not a whole lot of I think we're talking about a lot of bingo places today on the DawgNation Daily segment here. Not a lot of helicopter trips we've seen from Georgia to Connecticut to check on a player, but there you go, another helicopter trip to Long Island to see another player, the top player in New York for the state of 24. Man, they really are everywhere. I mean, if it would be possible through aviation records and everything else, I think this staff is probably going to check off somewhere upwards of 200, 300 schools in the month of January alone.
So let's kind of bounce through some 2024 stuff here for a minute. We can kind of keep this kind of quick if you want to. There's been some chatter lately about Colin Simmons, the 5-star edge rusher. How involved is Georgia in the Simmons recruitment right now?
Colin Simmons, I think he liked Georgia a lot. I think it was a first visit. Brandon, the feeling there is LSU had been the team to beat, and Georgia just jumped into the mix with a great visit. He told me Mama loved it. He said, Mama said, you could come here. Everything works here. Everything fits here. Then you see him on social media. I think it was a couple of days ago, Brandon, asking who can do commitment edits, not just top whatever edits. He told me he's in the process of narrowing it down. And, Brandon, it's almost to the point where I think Georgia's going to be in it for the balance of the remainder of this recruitment. He's a really special player, Brandon. I don't know if you saw some of the love he's gotten on social media and in person from Micah Parsons, probably the best defensive player in the NFL. His skills are legit, and I feel like the interest in Georgia is legitimate as well. Kind of waiting to see what the NIL numbers, what the NIL connection is going to look like there with Colin Simmons in the long run. That'll be another factor there. On
signing day, it's also decision day for 2024 name there, too. Ellis Robinson, a fantastic defensive back prospect. How closely should Georgia fans be watching the Robinson decision in the wake of all the conclusion of the 2023 class there, too?
Yeah, so the thing to watch for Robinson to see if he makes a visit this weekend to Alabama. That was a big school, always a big school for him in his process. Brandon Robinson told me verbatim, Georgia led before the trip to the national championship celebration and parade. Looked like he was having himself a really good time there in Athens. Looked like the 2024 commits were being really chummy around him, trying to make him feel at home, trying to make him feel welcome. I'll have a story that goes up on DawgNation.com today about Ellis Robinson. Just a really special person, special football player. And Brandon, the nation's number one corner for the 2024 cycle out of IMG Academy. Kind of feels like the Dogs are trying to pull a Bear Alexander here, where they got a 5-star from the next class on the signing day for a cycle for the seniors. Kind of. Maybe, and Brandon, you're sitting there going, well, I hope it doesn't go like that, Jeff, because Bear decommitted and then came back. You don't want to go through all that with Ellis Robinson, but he really likes the Dogs. He's always liked the Dogs. He's told me multiple interviews he can't think of a single negative thing about Georgia. Family feels the same way. Brandon, I do feel they're a very strong contender for that decision on Wednesday. And then another 2024 thing I wanted to get into for a moment. Justin Scott postponed his, commitment decision here this week. I can't tell how big of a factor Georgia is on Scott right now. What does it mean for Georgia that Scott delayed his announcement this week? Good. It's good. And you're talking about a 5-star defensive tackle, Brandon. That's the guys that you just want to keep seeing those guys file through assembly line into recruiting classes in Athens. And he's now backed it up considerably, Brandon. He wants to back it up until he's taken all of his official visits, which he can't take any yet. Notre Dame, Penn State, some of those Midwest schools were really there on him, really strong. And Georgia, I believe Georgia just offered him 2 weeks ago, and that was right about the time he set his decision point for the end of January. So I think that's a good thing for Georgia to get back in with Justin Scott. Very interesting on Scott. Some folks think he's an offensive lineman or defensive lineman, one of those guys that plays both ways for his high school program. I think that's one of those that you'll have to see the connection build there between Georgia and Scott for a highly rated player. I want to ask you one more thing about the 2023 class before we let you go. Before that, let me remind folks we are on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentell here today. And, of course, we're traveling around. We like to have that AAA membership card in our hand. It
benefited me so many times over the years when I've broken down or when I've saved money getting a hotel. I mean, there's lots of ways in which a AAA membership has worked out really well for me, but it can also be a great resource for you. And this is what you should know when it comes to your insurance needs there as well, because in the case of AAA, they've been doing the auto insurance thing for more than 100 years, and they've got a 93% satisfaction rate. That means if they're taking care of that many people and taking care of them at such a high level, they can do great things for you there too. So I think it's time for you to find out what AAA can do for you when it comes to your auto insurance. In fact, I want you to give them a call, 833-718-2075, 833-718-2075, and find out what AAA can do for you when it comes to your auto insurance. Because nobody knows the automotive stuff more than AAA anyway, so let them show you what they know about auto insurance there as well. All right, so Jeff, we'll finish with this. I saw where 24/7 Sports has done their kind of, I guess, final re-rank of the class of 2023. Yeah, we got some little graphic stuff here. I know On3 had done theirs recently, and that was really kind to a couple of Georgia guys. But when you look at the recent 24/7 stuff, I guess the thing that jumps out to me now is the fact that Jordan Hall is now number 16 overall on Rivals, and obviously did really well on the re-rank from 24/7 there too. I think when you make the list of like who are the most impactful guys that Georgia signed in 2023, I think that Jordan Hall is going to be a pretty high name there on that list. Any other kind of big thoughts from you on sort of re-rank season and kind of who's gotten a bump? I think Freeling's kind of gotten a nice bump here. I think that Raylan Wilson kind of got a nice bump here. What else jumped out to you about some of the re-rank stuff?
Yeah, Brandon, good thoughts there. First of all, I think Jordan Big Baby Hall is going to come for somebody's minutes, come for somebody's reps that was Georgia already felt pretty good about. I don't know if you ever saw when you were parading around the National Championship Open interview period out in Los Angeles with all the dog coaches and players, but hard not to see Trey Scott with a huge smile on his face because he knows what he has comes back.
Yeah.
And then, I just simply put, Big Baby Hall is going to be a name that I think will have a Bear Alexander plus type season for Georgia next year. He's just built like that, man, Brandon. He's going to help Georgia and help Georgia fast. Not to quite, I always listen. Georgia's recruiting these type of players, and all the fan base wants a guy in my position to say he's going to be the next so-and-so or he's going to be the next so-and-so. Jordan's not quite the same player as a Carter or as a Trayvon Walker or anything like that. I really think he's going to be the first Jordan Hall at Georgia, and that should really get folks just as excited because he's going to carve out his own type name. You see Monroe Freeling, Brandon, can't stress this enough, is when we start rolling out our in-depth profiles on the 2023 signees, we always call them the next generation. Brandon, I can't tell you how big Monroe Freeling was for Georgia. Not only did he look good against the top players in the country in Texas, he won the rep test, he passes the eye test. But, Brandon, I don't know how many people flash forward to the 2023 and 2024 season and what Georgia will look like at tackle. Brandon, we can't expect Broderick. Broderick Jones is going this year, but you look at it and you're going to see Amarius Mims also gone, and who's going to be that other guy that maybe steps in for the projection of Ernest Green III. I think Monroe Freeling could certainly be considered a starter candidate by his second year. 6'7", 300 pounds, Brandon, and he laughs. He kind of he loves it when people talk to him and they say, man, you don't look 300, you look more like 260. That's what he wants people to know. That's how trim an athlete he is. Yeah. Sometimes you look at him and you're like making a block and you're like, is that a tight end or is that Monroe? You see him from the side profile, Brandon. There's not a lot of extra bacon and eggs and mashed potatoes and hash browns and peanut butter and jelly there. He does yoga. He's very fit. He's very active. Brandon, he's got a 30-inch vert. I don't know how many tackles Georgia has signed that has a 30-inch vert. Maybe Broderick was pretty close to that, but he's a guy that's going to have to be a plug-and-play guy for Georgia. I think Raylan Wilson's going to be special. I mean, I'm going to say it all along till I'm kind of blue in the face. I think the 2024 defense with a lot of these guys in their second year, plus the 2022 guys, that's going to be the best defense Georgia has ever had all across the board.
That's good stuff, Jeff. I really appreciate that. Thanks for being here on the road. It's just about AAA today. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll look forward to reading from you. You said you had some good stuff coming on Ellis Robinson. Can't wait to read that. You also had a great piece this week on Sammy Brown, some other stuff there too. So DawgNation.com, the place to be for all of the UGA recruiting coverage. So enjoy that weekend, Jeff, and we'll look forward to talking to you some next week as National Signing Day will be upon us.
All right, man. Take it easy. Everybody have a great weekend.
You too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
By the way, we had a great night last night. So, a lot of times during the year, you don't really get a chance to have that like holiday party for us because the holiday time of year, Christmas, things like that, kind of comes at a time in which we're getting ready for the college football playoff and things like that. And we're even more spread out during that time of year than we normally would be, our DawgNation team. So we had a chance last night to sort of reflect on our year a little bit, got together. A local spot here in Atlanta where there's like some mini golf stuff going on, had some great food, great time. Our DawgNation team's grown a little bit behind the scenes, and that was kind of a fun thing to be a part of. Very competitive last night too, by the way. Getting after it with some mini golf stuff in one of the local places here around the Atlanta area. Just a really, really fun time. So it's kind of good to do that. We see various. Obviously, Jeff, Mike, and Connor and I, we see each other on the road. Sometimes we're traveling for games and things like that. But a lot of our DawgNation team spends most of the year. Part of us in Athens, part of us here in the Atlanta area. I'm pretty much always in the studio, so we don't always get a chance to be together as a full team like that. We had a great time last night. So big thanks to our fearless leader, BJ Sweeney, who kind of made all that possible last night. And just fun to be able to do that and reflect on what I think was not only a great year for the Dogs, the team that we cover, but also a really good year for DawgNation too. So we were really proud of that and had a great time there last night with all of that. Now, we'll all be together, at least most of us will be together, coming up for the DawgNation Cruise this April. In fact, that's a great way to segue here into cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. So many of you, in fact, we've heard from a lot of you this week who've already said, hey, we're getting excited about it. We're going to be on board. Independence of the Seas coming up this April, and I can't wait for that. And obviously, I'm excited about my family cruise coming up in February here, too. Really, we're kind of counting down just a few weeks away from what I think for my family is pretty much needed vacation. We've obviously got a lot going on in our life right now, so we're trying to get all that squared away so we can enjoy this time, and hopefully you have your own vacation you're looking forward to here in the upcoming year. I just feel like we need that, right? You need those moments to kind of refresh, recharge, and for us, there's no better way to do that than with a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. You've heard me say this before, that when it comes time to plan your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, the same thing we do for our DawgNation cruise or whatever specific Royal Caribbean trip you might be taking here this year, a great travel agent makes all of this more enjoyable, and I think the process of getting on board so much easier. And so Royal Caribbean has introduced us to a great travel agent. Her name's Jessica Slater. She was specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean, and you can give her a call right now, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also visit her online, website that she's put together, royaldogs.com. That's royaldogs.com. So you want information about the DawgNation cruise in April, maybe still a little bit of a window to get involved on that. Or you want information about the other great things happening, getting ready for spring break maybe coming up before you know it, already looking ahead to summer vacations, things like that. Jessica's got you on all of that, so make sure you use her as a terrific resource on that. Now, let's go cruise around the SEC here and talk about some news. Interesting chatter out of Tuscaloosa over the course of the last 24 hours. Certainly seems like it's heating up a little bit about Jeremy Pruitt as the next defensive coordinator at Alabama. I don't know if that means our buddy Mike Griffin's going to be SID at Alabama now or not. I'm not quite so sure how that works. Mike will have to explain that. But nonetheless, Pruitt could be, I say this in seriousness, that Pruitt really could be on his way, I guess, to Tuscaloosa. There's been some media stuff. There's been some photos come out of Pruitt like buying a new truck or something not too far from Tuscaloosa. So maybe that's a factor. I mean, I will say, of all the names that are realistic for Alabama, I don't believe that Glenn Schumann ever was probably realistic here. But of all the names that are realistic, Pruitt may be one of the few that actually get Alabama fans excited. And Alabama fans have really rallied around Jeremy Pruitt in kind of the post-Kirby Smart era as the defensive coordinator they still like. It's one of those things where, once Kirby left Alabama, went on to Georgia, had his own success, and now working on a level of success that may one day even surpass what's happened at Alabama. All of a sudden, I don't know that Alabama fans feel all that comfortable like claiming him as much anymore. So they've decided they do like Jeremy Pruitt, and so I believe that Pruitt would get a little bit of a hero's welcome if he were to be brought back to Tuscaloosa. And I think, compared to the hires that Alabama probably could make, this would probably stand as a pretty good one. I mean, I would say that Nick Saban's ability to hire defensive coordinators has probably not turned out to be as good as his ability to hire offensive coordinators. Most of his offensive coordinator hires have worked pretty well. I don't think Bill O'Brien worked, but prior to that, Steve Sarkisian was probably the best that he had. Brian Dable has gone on to be an NFL head coach. That was probably a pretty good hire. that Saban made for the 2018 season. Mike Locksley's a head coach now. That probably looks like a pretty good hire. Obviously, Lane Kiffin was kind of a transformational figure for that program. Saban's had pretty good success when it comes to hiring his offensive guys. Ironically, even though Saban himself is a big-time defensive mind, his defensive coordinator hires in kind of the post-Kirby Smart era, a little bit maybe left to be desired. You had Jeremy Pruitt stepping in there. In the immediate aftermath, that worked fine, but when Pruitt became Tennessee head coach, all of a sudden it was Tosh LaPoy. They decided he wasn't ready. Then it was Pete Golding, and it seems like, Saban showed some loyalty to Golding, but Golding never really ingratiated himself too much to the Alabama fans. So the Alabama defensive mentality, defensive output, performance is just not what it once was under Nick Saban. So I believe if Saban's going to try to have one more good run at things here before his career at Alabama comes to an end, kind of figuring out the defense is probably a pretty important thing here. And, Pruitt would probably be well received and probably justifiably so. I do believe this would be a good hire. But interesting to look at the previous two defensive coordinators, Golding and LaPoy, for different reasons. I'm not really quite so sure either guy was really working all that well for Alabama. I also mentioned earlier in the show that ESPN kind of roundtable thing that was out there of kind of looking at best players in college football and the hype that Jamon Dumas-Johnson got for that and Brock Bowers got for that. Looking at some of the other parts of that story, I think one of the other things that you see kind of pop up there is a little bit to say about what's going to happen at Florida here this offseason, where it certainly seems like a guy like Graham Mertz, the former Wisconsin quarterback, has been brought in with a chance to win the Florida starting job. And I think Gators fans justifiably are not too happy about this, that they were sort of hoping for a bigger name at quarterback arriving to the program. But this is a little bit bigger than just the Florida story alone. If you really follow transfer portal stuff, I think one of the things that you see here this offseason is the big sort of savior name in the transfer portal just kind of wasn't there. At one point you thought, well, maybe Drake May will be that guy, and there were all these rumors about the big millions of dollars that May was going to get paid as a potential transfer candidate, and just turned out not to be real. The alleged NIL opportunities, they were fake. May himself confirmed that. And then May just never left North Carolina. And, last year you saw a Caleb Williams go from an Oklahoma to USC. There just is no Caleb Williams level transfer quarterback in this year's cycle. Now, there's another transfer portal window coming up post-spring, but I'm not expecting any kind of big names, at least to that level, in that version of the portal either. And I think that Florida is one of those teams that suffers most from this. It's really 2 off seasons in a row that Billy Napier, I think, has had the hope of trying to fill in some gaps on a roster with the transfer portal, and that high level of talent that allows that to happen to the degree that Florida needs it to just kind of really isn't there. And I'll tell you the other thing to watch out for Florida a little bit, and I know we'll get more into this in the weeks and next couple of months here as you start to get ready for spring practice. Florida's also lost a decent amount off their offensive line. They've had some offensive linemen transfer out of that program. And when you think about Florida for next season, another thing that makes them vulnerable is not just what they might not have at quarterback, but be real careful with this offensive line here for Florida a little bit too. You've seen some kind of quietly some of those names exiting the program from that position group. Some of those names are starting to mount here a bit. And I mean, I just think it's probably safe to imagine when you start looking ahead to your season win totals and things like that, it's going to be a fairly common projection for Florida to have a losing season again. And to be much better than that is going to take a big leap from Florida that I'm not really quite so sure exists on paper. The pathway to that, I'm not really quite so sure that exists on paper. So something to keep in mind there on that. Florida with some issues along the offensive line and quarterback stuff that was even kind of showing up in one of those preseason ESPN stories that we talked about. I don't have this on the rundown, but I just want to mention this real quick because it just came out within the last hour. Miami has fired Josh Gaddis as its offensive coordinator. It's crazy. Gaddis won the Broyles Award 2 years ago at Michigan. Now, he probably shouldn't have. It should have been. It's amazing to me that somehow I said this a few weeks ago, that somehow Todd Monken has kind of flown under the radar for some of the success that he's had at Georgia. Maybe him flying under the radar is one of the things that up until now has made it easier to keep Monken. Maybe that's the case. But, I mean, you want proof of the fact that Monken's kind of flown under the radar is that go back to the 2021 season, it was Gaddis who actually won the Broyles Award for the nation's top assistant. He leaves to go to Miami. Now he's already been fired down there. Meanwhile, Todd Monken just keeps right on rolling with the same level of success that he's been having. So, Gaddis also had some ties to Alabama at one point in time. But out at Miami here just today, Josh Gaddis fired by the Hurricanes. Their offense was terrible. There's no disputing that. So the coaching star for Gaddis has certainly fallen quite a bit. Now out of a job there at Miami will make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now here on a Friday on DawgNation Daily, we'd like to roll into the weekend in style. And we like to do that with what we call our Big Finish, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. Now, for so many of you, you're getting ready to enjoy some of that great Finnish Long Drink for your conference championship games here this weekend, your football watching plans, or whatever you have going on here this weekend. The Finnish Long Drink, we believe, goes well with that. In fact, we like to give shouts out to those who are enjoying some Finnish Long Drink, including Macy Skiles, who checks in to say it's my 21st birthday, and this was the only plan I had, enjoying some Finnish Long Drink. Macy also tags Miles Teller in there, who actually just became an investor in the Finnish Long Drink, too. Of course, you know Miles from Top Gun Maverick, now kind of a part of the management team there with the Finnish Long Drink. So Macy enjoying that for her 21st birthday, and we celebrate that as part of our Big Finish today, presented by the Finnish Long Drink. If you want to be like Macy and try some yourself and enjoy all of that, well, our friends at the Finnish Long Drink can make that possible for you. Just, in fact, go to thelongdrink.com. That's the website, thelongdrink.com, and put in your zip code. You can figure out where you can pick some up today, whether it be a bar near you or a beverage store or getting out to golf courses. Always very popular around the golf courses near where I live. You like the Long Drink Cranberry, the Long Drink Strong, that's 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar. The traditional, the blue can's got the grapefruit kind of citrus flavor with the gin kick. It's a mixed drink, ready-to-drink cocktail right there in the can. It looks like a beer, but it's not. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail right there in the can. So try some today, thelongdrink.com for more on that. And since I mentioned those conference championship games coming up here this weekend, great time to get involved here with our friends at MyBookie with the action. In fact, I was looking at the spreads at MyBookie a little earlier. So you got Philadelphia as a slight favorite against San Francisco. MyBookie's got that at 2.5. You've got Kansas City, now that the status for Patrick Mahomes is all cleared up. They're kind of back to a favorite spot again over Cincinnati at about 1.5. So kind of two fun conference championship games here this weekend. And if you haven't opened your account yet with our friends at MyBookie, this is a great time to do that, to get some action down on these games this weekend. Not just the point spread. You want to do the totals and things like that. Great time to get involved with MyBookie. In fact, take advantage of the big sign-up deposit bonus when you do that. You put in money into your account, MyBookie is going to essentially double that for you. So you put in $400, our friends at MyBookie will put in $400 for you. You literally have $800 in your account before you place your first bet. It's that simple. It's winning season at MyBookie. You can get a big deposit bonus up to $1,000. So make sure you take advantage of all of that today. Simply type MyBookie into your browser. The internet will do the work for you. Then after that, use the promo code DawgNation. That's the promo code DawgNation to take advantage of the big deposit bonus. Then enjoy conference championship stuff this weekend, rolling into the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks, college basketball stuff, whatever's going on, kind of passing the time before the next college football season. Always more fun to have some action down on the games, and our friends at MyBookie give you a chance to do that. So find MyBookie online, use the promo code DawgNation, take advantage of the big deposit bonus, enjoy the football this weekend, play, win, get paid, enjoy winning season with our friends at MyBookie. So one of the things that goes on as I do the show is we have a comment section that pretty much stays at each other's throat most of the time. Now, a lot of this is like non-Georgia fans kind of popping in here and messing with the Georgia fans, and listen, they all enjoy it. It's their favorite pastime, I think. So they like going back and forth with each other, and sometimes they'll kind of bring me into this, including our buddy Frankie Fibonacci on Twitter here. We'll give him a golden shoe today. He says, "Hey, DawgNation Daily," and he shouts out some of our other folks in our comment section. Can I get a retweet if this is one of your favorite pieces of mail to receive in January? Basically enjoying that Sports Illustrated National Championship commemorative issue, seeing Stetson Bennett with the national championship trophy once again, the confetti raining down, and Frankie enjoys that, and they all enjoy kind of rubbing in the faces from those Alabama fans who don't have anything like that in their life right now. So Frankie will give you a golden shoe there for that. And by the way, speaking of lousy, stinking Gators, we talked about them a moment ago. They got more bad news. 274 days from right now, that is our Gator Hater Countdown, and we'll see you all back here on Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. So I told you this before the show began, if you were with us when we did kick things off today, that I got a little bit of a family thing here today and this weekend, so I can't stay here for comments. I'm going to take kind of like one trip around the various comment sections, and then we'll try to come back and we'll do more comments with you there on Monday. So apologize for the lack of comments here today, but we're going to let some of y'all get your weekend started a little early here coming up in just a moment. Bill says, looking ahead to 2023, biggest key is going to be quarterback play. Obviously, breaking in a new starting quarterback after the success that Stetson Bennett's had the last couple of years, not going to be an easy thing to do, and I think that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Dogs Only says, our players making angels and the confetti was great. It sure was. Such an enjoyable time. Such an enjoyable time. Big Dog looking ahead to Marius Mims, very important player on this team for this upcoming season. No doubt about that. Over here on YouTube here for a moment. Wally Smith says, excuses coming from the Bama fans and the crybaby. So Wally's over here mixing it up. You love to see that. Cassie Turner is too. Jerry Dog fan looking ahead to the new shirt for 2023. Obviously, we're go for 2 in 22, and we're looking ahead to that big season in 2023, and we look forward to unveiling that here very, very soon. Very, very soon. Let's see what else. Jonathan Aaron says, with our week schedule this year, do you think we have 2 receivers with around 400 to 500 yards in the first few games? I feel Beck or Brock will throw it around at will a few games. Yeah, listen, they're going to have the opportunity to do that. I mean, the most advantageous thing about having, as you call it, kind of a weak schedule, most people would kind of describe it that way, is that whoever your starting quarterback kind of ends up being, they're going to have plenty of time to get acclimated to the season, just given the fact that Georgia expects to be such a big favorite in most of those games. Brandon Adams was the 2023 DawgNation putting champion last night. So we went to one of those kind of fancy new places in Atlanta where you do kind of the fancy mini golf where they have like a lot of, it's like super technological where like it tracks your ball every time you strike it, and it's really fun. And I was the winner. I wasn't going to mention that myself, but I was the winner last night. I mean, we're all winners because we get a chance to spend time together, but in actuality, there can only be one winner. It was me. So we had 2 rounds. I didn't win the first round, but I did win the second round. But my score, if you must know, was the highest of anybody's. So I wasn't going to mention that, but since it comes up, I'll yeah, we're going to go for 2 again next year for me on that award. Yeah, that's right. But it was really fun. It was. It was. Let's see what else. Darian Davis on the subject of time for another 1,000-yard rusher. I'd like to see it. I really would. That's just, it's one of those things, like I've been calling for this kind of stuff for a while, and apparently it just doesn't matter. Hey, use Brock Bowers more. Lean on that running game a little bit more. Get those rushing totals kind of back up where they kind of used to be. And Georgia never quite did a lot of that this season, and it didn't seem to matter at all. So maybe that's just more of what you'll see in 2023 as well, a little bit more of that sort of spread out ensemble style here. But I'd like to see Georgia have a 1,000-yard rusher again. Maybe that's just the old school guy in me, but I'd like to see that again. And I think they've got the candidates to maybe be able to do that. We're going to talk more about this in the weeks to come. I actually have that written down as a future topic, but I wouldn't mind seeing that. All right, on Facebook, then we have to go. Philip Jordan Wells says, nothing wrong with winning a title in Georgia. Yeah, listen, he's talking about the mini golf thing from last night. Yeah, it was fun. I had a great time with that. Joel Moody has a good question. He says, better chance of 1,000 yards, is it Bowers or Milton? Well, Bowers is going to be a pretty sizable favorite in that comparison just because he came so close to it this year. Lucy Bowers-Boykin says, see you Monday. Such a long weekend without DawgNation Daily in college football. Yeah. One of our last weekends with the football period. And now, obviously, for a lot of us, the NFL is a poor substitute for college football. But, yeah, always a little weird kind of rolling in one of these weekends when you don't have the football. Mark Thornton says he saw the ESPN comment about Jamon Dumas-Johnson, but he thinks that Munden is actually better. Listen, I think Smile Munden really came on in a big way towards the end of the year, and this could be one of those things where, Georgia fans who watch this closely may have a much better idea of just how good Smile Munden is, the way that like the sort of more survey-oriented ESPN-type folks might not be able to do. David Wayne Carroll also shouting out Branson Robinson, another guy that could really be vying to be Georgia's leading rusher. I think you might be right about that. So Ricky Kendall checks in to say, the last time I commented here, I wanted a championship. We got 2 now and hopefully a third. Well, Ricky, we're glad to have you back here, and hopefully your words will prove prophetic, and Georgia will win that 3rd national championship here in 2023. We'll also leave it right there for today. As I said before, sorry for popping out of here early, but we got a bunch of stuff I've personally got to do today, so I'm going to roll out of here. But I wish all of you a great weekend. Y'all check out the AJC online, ajc.com. You want coverage of the conference championship stuff for this weekend, they will give you that. You want to start looking at the Hawks and some of the stuff going on there. Obviously, Trae Young, an all-star. You can check that out. And you want to continue to get some of those commemorative, celebratory pieces honoring the national champions, the back-to-back Dog National Champions, ajc.com/dogsnews to go there on that, ajc.com/dogsnews for more on that. You want the field editions, the framed things, the nice book, the Glory book that I'm a part of. You can get all of that online, ajc.com/dogsnews. That's ajc.com/dogsnews. All right. Have a great weekend. Big thanks to R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You trust them on all of that today. And then we will see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.